Hello and welcome to the Innovation Series. I'm going to be speaking to you about rapid prototyping, which is a component of the design thinking process. And rapid prototyping is both an action, but I would say there is an entire philosophy built into why you do rapid prototyping, which makes all the difference. So first and foremost, let's look at a very sharp dichotomy but in the way people think about things, which is most people say that money is tight, resources are scarce, so let's think it all through. Make sure that we know exactly how we are going to do things before acting or before we are investing, right? So this entire belief is what is very common in every organization, practically every organization on the planet, including big, huge behemoths, where they say that, let's think it all through, let's figure out the entire plan as detailed as possible and then act, right? Design thinkers, because they're trying to come up with breakthrough solutions and radical solutions that make disproportionate use of resources, and also trying to solve problems that have not been necessarily solved before in creative ways, we believe that this is actually not a particularly good way of doing it, because you cannot think it all through. You do not know what the problem really is till you've tried to solve it. So what we do is we do rapid prototyping. A rapid prototyping is a very, very inexpensive way to eliminate risk, to think through the act of doing. So it's not, so instead of thinking being a high level operation that smart people do, and doing is something that people who are lower on the totem, who just use their hands and who don't think for themselves do, that entire model you do away with, and you say thinking and doing are both very important, and you don't just do it in sequence. Doing is a way of thinking. Doing is a very important way of thinking, because the act of prototyping actually tells you much more about the nuances of the problems than if you just you try to create the problem on paper, right? So why do you prototype? There's many reasons. Here's why you prototype. You first and foremost, you spot opportunities very early when you start prototyping and come up with very crude renditions of the solution. But this is probably the most important, the second reason is probably the most important reason, which is that you identify failure modes very early and very quickly and very inexpensively. Because if those failure modes have not been identified, they will wait for you, and they will be much more expensive to solve later down the road when you've sunk so much money that you can't, it's very hard to go back to the drawing board. So it's to identify failure modes very, very early. Prototypes have a way of creating a discourse where once you put the prototype, the quality of the conversation is much higher, and you look at the same thing from many different angles, right? Once you have a prototype, a crude prototype, you can go to a user, you can go to a stakeholder and get very, very good feedback and feed it back into the decision process, including the decision of whether to go down that path or completely abandon the path and go back to the drawing board or not, okay? When the prototype is crude, when it's rough, it actually allows for people to give you honest evaluation without making you feel that they're insulting you. So that a rough and a crude prototype, if it's put in the hands of people, it is a way in which to get early feedback, which is early evaluation, which is very, very important in an honest way, right? Now, one of the things that happens with prototypes is that you might be designing for a certain situation, but you don't realize that there are many other things that are involved in it. And once you come up with a prototype, you actually realize that, oh, there is something completely counterintuitive. So in the need finding section, the way we spoke about the fact that when you have we were talking about the story about the 3-stone stove, and how in Myanmar the woman just cared about how quickly the rice is going to cook. That was a counterintuitive insight you found out through ethnography. Turns out that rapid prototyping is a very important way in which to understand what the problem really is and understand different insights. Now it's one thing to ask someone that, hey, if I gave you the solution, would you use it? Chances are they'll say yes. But if you give them an ability to experience the solution, you get, as a designer, you get to understand whether they'll really use it, or they'll stop using it after some time, or they're genuinely excited about it, but much more importantly, what parts of what you've designed are working really well, or what parts are failure modes that are going to keep it from in the last mile and keeping it from succeeding, right? So the ability to giving the user an ability to experience some kind of a prototype of the solution is a fantastic way of understanding whether it's going to work or not. The other thing is that very often you're in an early stage, you need a lot of people to buy into your vision so as to get the resources, so as to get the permission, so as to get the runway to actually do it. And a prototype is a far, far better way of communicating a vision than a document or a slide, right? So it's a much better way of communicating what it is that you really want to do. And a good prototype, and it could be a video, it could be an object, it could be an experience, it could be many different things, but it tends to inspire people and bring them along and say, oh, it could be even better, and they start thinking about your problem, and you get to co-opt their minds as well. Okay, so the fundamental reason, again, why you do rapid prototyping is fail early and often in order to succeed sooner. You make this kind of failure your friend. You are not afraid of early prototype failing, because failure is something you can learn from, so that those failures are not built into your final solution, and you have a very, very robust solution because you've weeded out all those failure modes, right? Now, there are three kind of tenets to rapid prototyping: rough, rapid, and right. Rough means that it is only as refined as it needs to be. If you can fold a piece of paper to show what people are doing, or sketch something on the board, or do a skit so that a new kind of banking system is being shown, or a little tiny folded piece of cardboard that you can show how you're separating seeds. That is if you can show that with bent cardboard and scotch tape, then you don't need to go into sheet steel or welded metal and so on. You can demonstrate a whole lot at that level, right? Rapid means that you are building a whole lot very quickly. So this is an example of a medical device that I worked on when I was a designer. I was working as a product designer, and this is a sleep apnea mask that people wear when they are afflicted with this condition called sleep apnea, where they stop breathing when they're sleeping. And we built roughly, I would say, 60 prototypes in 2 days. So you lay your hands on anything you can find, and you cobble together things, and you work very, very quickly. Right has to do with that question that you're asking. We had talked about it in the design thinking arc, that it's very important to ask the right question. You are prototyping around a certain question. Is this going to fit on the head? Are people going to wear it? Are you going to be able to take it out at night and still wear it? Or let's say you're working on a banking system for someone for the rural unbanked. You're saying, is this person going to trust the system? Are they actually going to understand the notion of currency? Are they going to understand that once they are giving their hard-earned money to the bank is not going to steal it? If the bank they have just deposited the cash, and the bank gives the money to somebody else, do they understand that it's not their money that's being given away? These are all questions. And so if you wanted to prototype a product or a service And in the banking situation, you can actually figure out a prototype of how you would test that out. You're asking that one question and you're trying to figure out a prototype that answers that question. Because either whether it works or whether it's not, it's a very important assumption that you're going to move forward with, because a failure is probably even more important than a success, right? So rapid prototypes come in many forms. These are from the product design world. This is an early prototype of a tablet computer where it's just a piece of plastic with a paper stuck on it with sketches on it. This is for a car industry, something happening on the dashboard, but it's made with paper with Scotch tape. These are complex mechanisms for a printer. I worked on all these projects, so I know what this was. This was a mechanism for a high-speed printer for a printer manufacturing company, and all the mechanisms were made out of cardboard earlier. This is a new kind of gas station, and the whole gas station is made out of tiny little blocks and pipe cleaners and bent wire and toy cars. And the whole interaction of how the person is going to pay for the gasoline is being played out through tiny little models. Here is the early version of a smartphone, and we are figuring out what might a visual interface look like. And instead of doing a whole lot of programming, we are using a sticky on top of a monochromatic screen to figure out what it might look like. And this is a really good story. This is a very famous example from IDEO. I happened to be in the room when this happened. This is during the design of a surgical instrument to work on the sinus cavity, and it's like a very high-speed drill that goes in and carves a bone. And the first prototype was made with while people were speaking, people said, hey, how can we mimic a handgun? Because handguns have been optimized for holding comfortably in your hand. Can we steal that idea? So this was is a marker and a film can and a paper clip stuck with tape. And the surgeon was in the room, and the surgeon said that you're so close to the brain that you actually want to be like an artist holding a paintbrush really lightly. If you hold it like a gun, you're using your big muscles and it can shake. But if you're using your fingertips, you can manipulate it really quickly. So he just tore the Scotch tape, flipped it around so that the clip came like this, and taped it back. Now look at what the architecture of the real instrument. That entire instrument, the architecture of the instrument followed that one tiny moment. There's a lot of engineering that went into it. There's cast magnesium and all sorts of cutting edge physics and so on and so forth. But this architecture was a very, very important departure from what was the norm, and that made all the difference. This product did extremely well in the market. So this is the power of early rapid prototyping. But when you don't have a prototype, this is how the conversation goes. Everybody's speaking to everybody else. Everybody has a different thought, and they don't know what the real thing is. The moment you have a prototype, everybody focuses on the prototype, and someone says, if we do this, it's going to be too expensive. The person looked at this and says that, is this going to break in with the kind of conditions that we are going to give? But they're all speaking about the same thing, and they're looking at it from different points of view, which is super important, right? Now, it's not just physical things that can be prototyped. All sorts of things can be prototyped. This is a information system in a hospital and a hospital bed that's being prototyped with paper and cardboard. Here is a new role of a person that they're play acting with tape stuck on their outfit to talk about what a new role might be. This is just a piece of foam with some stickies to show how a new interface might be. And that on the last one is certain quickly found objects stuck onto a handle, etc., to show you how one can have a new kind of hospital bed and the controls that might be. So it's very easy to prototype quickly. So in summary, I'm just going to summarize the points that we just did. Fail often and early in order to develop robust solutions. Prototyping is not just a method, it's an entire way of thinking. You find out new things, you make decisions in new ways, you ask questions and develop solutions simultaneously. So if you're using rapid prototyping, you're not just implementing what you've thought, you're actually asking new questions during the time you're prototyping, and you're developing the problem side and the solution side simultaneously. And what you do is, by doing this, is that you thought that the problem was this, but you expand on the problem space and you realize that, oh, that stakeholder is also important, this other failure mode is important, these people have an objection. So it opens up the semantic space within which you're considering it. Practically anything can be prototyped. When you have very, very large scale systems, you have to think of small ones and simulations and so on, but most other things can be prototyped. This question of whether it is refined enough or whether it's crude enough, it is only as refined as it needs to be. If you need to machine titanium and that's the lowest fidelity that you can get, then that's the lowest fidelity you can get. But if you can bend cardboard and use Scotch tape to answer the same question, then don't machine titanium, okay? And you just have to be very resourceful in the materials and means. You just look around with whatever you have. If you have pieces of wood, you have wire, you have human bodies that you can play act, you can do a skit. You just be resourceful with what you have, because most of my students in both in undergraduate or graduate or the exec ed who do, they come up with very, very big plans of how entire automobile systems are going to change, or how banking is going to change, etc. And the prototyping materials are on the desk with them, a few things that they can bend and stick and so on, and play act, and that's sufficient, okay? And to remind you, the 3 R's: rough, rapid, and right. Thank you.